Well, greetings from ex-Catholics for Christ. This is our end of the year term report, I suppose, as we used to call it at school, of what we've been doing over the last 12 months. And we've been very busy. James tells me we did over 5,000 miles, and we visited Scotland. I'll come to that in a minute. We got to Edinburgh, to Glasgow and to Stirling, and whilst you were there you visited Stirling Castle. We also got down to London, Golders Green, where we were the following year, and we also got back to Oxford, which is a little bit slow to begin with and very cold, but boy oh boy did it heat up later on in the last hour.
Absolutely.
Thoroughly enjoyed it. I had a wonderful conversation, and you did too, with a Catholic theologian, no less, who doesn't believe any of it. But no, it's been a very, very busy year, and as always we look forward to see what's going to happen next year. But in England, it's been dominated with Brexit. That's the whole thing that's gone on, Brexit. 2 years ago, we had a referendum, the first one ever in my life, that I've been able to vote in. 17 million people voted to leave Europe. Leave means leave. Leave means leave. And we thought it probably would go through, take about a year. Here we are 2.5 years later, back and forth, back and forth. I'm not sure what the state of play is now. The Prime Minister seems to be on the ropes frequently. She flies off there to meet all these undemocratic elected politicians. Most of them have been on corruption charges. Most of them will never work anywhere again. The books aren't edited or anything done at all.
Audited for
25 years. What's going on here? And you have our Prime Minister only about a couple of months ago flying out at 4:30 in the morning to meet the head of the EU. So Brexit carries on. I'm not sure what's going to happen. We're committed legally, by law, by Parliament, to leave March the 29th next year. Let's see what happens. Laws can be changed, laws can be watered down, or we say, well, let's push it back to March the 29th the following year. So we'll have to see on that.
We'll go back to the Ireland vote when they had the decision to enter the euro, to take on the euro currency, and the Irish government lost the vote. The people said, no, we want to keep, was it the Irish pound?
Yeah, the Irish pound, that's right.
And that shocked the government, and they said, well, that's not good enough for us. We need another referendum, which we may see concerning Brexit.
Well, once again, their advisors have told them, yes, boss, we'll get it all through. There's going to be no problem at all. Call for the referendum. And, of course, it went against them. But the interesting thing was that the Prime Minister went on the television, pleaded for everybody, almost castigating the people who'd done it, that they had put him in this difficult position, that he had to go to Brussels and explain what had happened. And it went back and forth, and finally they had enough, a referendum, and guess what? It was passed.
Yeah, which reminds me of when Tony Blair was Prime Minister. He said to Gordon Brown, we want to get rid of the pounds and have the euro. And Brown said, no, it won't work for the UK. And to Brown's credit, he was able to talk Blair out of throwing the pound out and adopting the euro.
Still have the pound.
But I think if I was a gambling man, and of course I'm not, but if I was, I would suggest we're probably going to see a second referendum, maybe January or February. And with all of the media and the governments and opposition parties and celebrity characters, so on and so forth, all pushing to remain, I think it's quite likely that if we have a second referendum with all of the apparatus of the governments and the media and the print press working together, they'll probably do what they did in Ireland. Force the people to capitulate stay in Brussels indefinitely.
The whole thing is that the Prime Minister at that time, David Cameron, was told by his advisors that there would be a referendum and the referendum would go the government's way.
Right.
And it did not. And he overnight resigned from the job. It was a Remainer, and the woman who took over, Mrs. May, was also a Remainer. And so often these people, the advice that they're given, it goes completely against them. Let's throw it out a little bit more. All the pundits said Hillary Clinton was going to win the election. She didn't. All the pundits said Cardinal Scala of Milan would be the next Pope. He wasn't. All the pundits said Ed Miliband would be the next Prime Minister. And Mrs. Miliband was so sure of this that she phoned up Mrs. Cameron to say, we'd like to move in 1 o'clock the next day. Could you have the curtains taken down and we bring our own curtains with us? Yeah. And also they were going to put a big headstone up in London, in Trafalgar Square, Triumphant March. It did not happen. We're frequently told all of this, and
we're told that Brexit wouldn't work out.
And Brexit wouldn't work out as well. So Cameron went, but I see he's sort of hanging around a little bit more. So when he's come back in the picture. Again, another ex-Prime Minister like Tony Blair hanging around, putting their forcing their opinions onto people, but we'll see what happens to Brexit.
But it's kind of embarrassing to see Mrs. May flying all over Europe, who incidentally is a type 2 diabetic, and isn't it interesting how she caught diabetes when she drafted the legislation to allow same-sex couples to marry? same-sex couples to adopt children. Maybe we'll discuss that in a few more minutes. But it's kind of embarrassing to see her flying all over Brussels with a begging bowl, trying to get a deal done. But like I say, if I was a gambling man, and I'm not, but if I was, I would suggest that it's quite likely we're going to see a second referendum, which they'll probably vote in order to stay in the EU.
Yeah, I mean,
because this country has been brainwashed for decades when it comes to Brussels.
It'll be interesting what the questions are on it. It'll be a lot more, it won't be like the last one. But Mrs. May goes to church every Sunday, doesn't she?
She's an Anglican. In fact, talking about churches, talking about religions, we have a couple of guys in the UK who I'm sure some of you may have heard of, a guy called Ian Duncan Smith and Jacob Rees-Mogg, both devout Catholics. And I mean devout Catholics, anti-abortion, anti-homosexuality, and yet their boss, the Pope, is in favour of united Europe.
One world order, man. Yeah, that's right.
And yet I don't quite understand why these two Catholics are out of step with their own church.
This Pope is the arch-globalist. There's no doubt about it. He's the arch-globalist. And, of course, the whole thing is that Europe is one. They tried it years ago. I remember in South America, probably you don't remember, about 10 years ago, they sent Bill Clinton over there to have one currency for South America. It never happened. But Europe it had. And you've got 27 nations there now, wanting even more to come in. Yeah, these are Roman Catholics who obviously are very...
In fact, Tony Blair's more in step because he's pro-Brussels.
And he's a convert as well, Tony Blair.
Why is he pro-Brussels, the European Union, and his Catholic counterparts, Rees-Mogg,
are not?
And Duncan Smith are not? Strange.
That's religion for you. Yeah, that's religion for you. But Northern Ireland seems to be the tricky thing. As long as I can remember, there's been problems with Ireland. Didn't Cromwell have some problems in Ireland?
They've all had problems with Ireland going back to the 14th century.
Wow.
So what else has been of interest to us throughout the year of 2018?
Well, we're very delighted. A dear brother of ours offered to update our website, which hasn't been done in, 15 years?
12 years probably, long overdue.
And he said, no, I'll have a go at it. And we said, well, OK, take your time, because he works very, very hard. And he's done a wonderful job. I think he's almost finished now.
It's all finished.
All finished. It's up and running. Very delighted with what he's done there. Please visit it. Please let us know what you think. We're very pleased that it's come about. It was long overdue. A lot of cobwebs there, and it needed dusting down. So we're very pleased that that's happened. And we do pray for that dear brother as well. What else should we be thinking about?
Well, for me, the highlight this year has been to go to Scotland. We've driven 5,000 miles this year. We went to Edinburgh, Glasgow and Stirling and other parts in Scotland. We also visited Lockerbie on the way back to England. But my project had been at the end of last year to start preparing for my next video documentary. You may remember I did Oliver Cromwell from 2017. And I thought, who else could I do? And I thought, let's do something on King James. Not so much concerning the translators or how the Bible came into being. That's been very well documented by experts over, maybe 200 or 300 years. But I wanted to look at the man himself, King James, James Stewart. Who was he? And it was fascinating for me to discover that he was a very scarred man. And I mean really scarred. His parents tried to kill each other before he was even born. And that caused trauma in the womb of Mary, and of course that went some way in explaining why King James was a very effeminate man, and I think he was effeminate. Was he homosexual? I don't believe so, but I think when you look at the trauma that Mary experienced when it came to her husband trying to kill her and also trying to kill her unborn child, that causes trauma. And you speak to homosexuals or lesbians, many times they will say, well, I've always felt this way. They say, when I was 2 or 3 or before I was born, I always felt this way. Well, go back to how you were born. What was your environment like? Were your parents fighting? Did you experience any kind of trauma growing up? And that went some way for me, trying to explain or trying to understand why King James was the way that he was. I read many articles, many letters from James to his lieutenants, to his servants, to his friends, to his family. Very flowery language. Of course, that was very typical for the era. But it was very interesting to travel to Edinburgh, where he was born, and go to Stirling Castle, where he was raised. For many, many years, he didn't see, obviously, his mother. She was under house arrest. A bit like even go back to Henry VIII, when Elizabeth was being raised. She didn't see her parents, or her father especially, for many years. And when Mary was being raised, and her mother, of course, Mary of Aragon, she too wasn't allowed to see her mother. Because in those days, royal family members, the kings and queens, wouldn't allow their children to be raised by their own mothers. They were raised by servants. So poor old King James, from a very young age, was being raised by people like George Buchanan, and who went to Glasgow, dominated in memory of George Buchanan. And poor old James, mother was in prison, like I say, father died at the age of 19. In fact, he was murdered by the age of 19. But very interesting man, a very scarred man. I think when we speak to homosexuals or lesbians or people from the transgender community, it's worth reminding ourselves why they are the way that they are. And again, it goes back to what is their family environment like. Sometimes before they were born, and many times after they were born.
Yeah, I mean, also up in Scotland, you went to John Knox's house, didn't you?
Well, John Knox is another interesting character.
Yeah.
He's called the Thundering Scot, a very controversial Calvinist. And I read a quote a few days ago about Knox. In fact, I'm currently reading a book about Thomas Cromwell. And yes, he was a relative to Oliver Cromwell. And some of the statements from John Knox concerning women would probably be considered hate crime today. But he was a very interesting man, John Knox, always a thorn in the side of Mary, and also was a thorn in the side of King James to some extent. A 5-point Calvinist would marry a 17-year-old girl. He was, 52, 53? A bit like when Muhammad married Aisha. But these people are all linked up. And if you go to Scotland, you can go into his home, have a look around. It's an ancient building. A lot of history in Scotland, lovely parts of the UK.
I mean, it's amazing to me. I mean, did Jesus said, I am the way, the truth and the life? Well, that would certainly have him as a hate monger now, saying something like that. And in this country, we have these diversity weekends which they send you on if you come out with anything which they find not acceptable to the religious situation. I am the way, the truth and the life. No man comes to the Father but by me. Not Buddha, not Allah, not Methodist, anybody like that at all, but only Jesus. What a thing to say.
Absolutely. But looking at King James, a very scarred man, and later in his life he got a taste for alcohol. I mean, let's be quite honest. When we write about people or review people, let's not close our eyes to some of the issues that these people experienced. I mean, look at Israel at the moment. Benjamin Netanyahu, currently under investigation for corruption, for fraud, as is his wife. A lot of our premillennial friends wouldn't want to even touch this.
No, I mean, he's not the first either. I mean, I can think of 3 prime ministers before who've been like this,
Yeah.
and both of them, I think, were convicted as well.
But when we think about James, we think about his background. I mean, we will call it as we see it, and yes, he was far from perfect. And it was interesting reading some of the books in defence of King James, and people were saying, well, he couldn't have been a homosexual because he wrote against homosexuality. That doesn't mean anything. King David wrote against murder and adultery, and he did both. Some of our friends, some of our Presbyterian friends and some of our Reformed friends don't understand the two natures in the believer. Now, I'm not going to say that King James was a homosexual. I think it's more likely he was effeminate, going back to his upbringing. I mean, he had no parents. He was raised by tutors. He was raised by lieutenants, servants, not much of an upbringing. And even when his firstborn was born, Henry, the Prince of Wales, King James wouldn't allow Henry's mother, Anne of Denmark, to visit Henry. He was locked away. From memory, it may have been Stirling Castle, as James had been locked away growing up. And of course that was an awful strain on Anne of Denmark, who may have been a closet Catholic, we don't know. But all of this leads into the psyche, which takes us to Sigmund Freud. We went to his house this year.
Yeah, I just want to get back to your saying about James. He would have had many tutors. Their influence would have permeated to him.
Yep.
He would have been influenced by these men and servants and other courtiers in the court. So we don't know what sort of corruption they were feeding into him or how they were influencing him as well.
Well, it's been suggested he was raised very much in a male-dominated world. But today that's considered a bad thing. Why would it be considered a bad thing back in the time of King James? I mean, look at schools today, look at nurseries today. 90% of the teachers are women.
That's right.
And you've got boys, young boys being raised in a female-dominated environment, and they are producing beta males. And boys need strong fathers, alpha males. Poor old King James, just for the record, his father was 19 when he married Mary. She was 23, 24.
Yeah.
It's far too young.
Yeah.
And like I say, a lot of fighting. And on one occasion, Henry, James's father, got a gun out, went to shoot Mary, and of course he pointed it out the womb. She was 7 months pregnant. And had he pulled the trigger, she would have died, obviously, and so too would have King James. That's a terrible trauma. On top of that, she jumps on a horse. She goes from Stirling to Dunbar, a distance of I think 29 miles from memory. She's 7.5 months pregnant. I mean, the trauma that King James, not yet born, would have experienced, explains to me why he was the way that he was. Down the line, he will get involved with some murky affairs, considering some archbishops of Canterbury and other bishops, concerning friends of King James, concerning unscriptural divorces. And again, I do write about that in the newsletter, which you can get at the end of this month. But let's not shy away from the controversial subjects. Let's not close our eyes and say it's not possible, it's all propaganda. Let's have an open mind when it comes to King James, concerning my project, and even Oliver Cromwell. In fact, on Cromwell's deathbed, he was almost questioning his salvation. Guilty conscience, you see.
So, next year, what are you going to do? You're not sure yet?
No idea yet. I'm currently looking at a few subjects from the 16th and 17th century. But when it comes to King James, allow me to say a couple more things, if I may. That yes, he was controversial. Yes, he was scarred. Lost his parents, like I say. Would give the green light to the commissioning of the King James Bible. And it's kind of sad, really, when people leave comments, not always, but sometimes now videos, attacking King James and calling him names, some of which are unfounded, slandering him, of course, and they are mimicking and mirroring and parroting a lot of his enemies. And I think what's probably happened in recent years is we've had an infiltration into the King James community, which also takes me to the Trinity. But before we get to the Trinity, we went to Sigmund Freud's house.
We went to Sigmund Freud's house. As we were in London, we wanted to go there. We also went to where Ruth Ellis shot her lover, but that's another story. We wanted to go to where Karl Marx was buried, weren't we?
Yeah.
But we discovered that the museum is now a private museum. Don't know too many private museums, and we couldn't get in there. But we did want to do Marx as well. Yeah, we went to the Sigmund Freud house, went inside. What can I say about him? A lovely house. He came there in 1939, I believe, died about a year later. But the whole of the aspect of psychology really goes back to Sigmund Freud. And you're either a Jungian, Carl Jung, or you're a Freudian. There seems to be nobody in between.
How would Freud, do you think, assess King James?
Again, he'd go back to the trauma of the childhood, the lack of a father. He'd have put so much of this down to the sexual promiscuity of the times as well.
Of course, his mother was married 3 times.
Well, there we are. That's what he'd say. But it was interesting going to the house. Freud, I mean, he's still very much in the world now, whereas Jung, who's come much more into his own with New Age religion and all of this sort of thing, dreams and UFOs and Hollow Earth, which I don't think Freud went into.
But he wasn't an atheist, was he? He was very much into the occult, Sigmund Freud.
He was into the occult very much.
A lot of artefacts
and
in his
I believe
house.
Well, we didn't go in there, but some of our group did go in there. There are a lot of artefacts. I think it's
Very religious man.
Very religious man, and I think he wrote a treaty about an article about Abraham and Isaac and so forth. Yeah, very religious man. I mean, he'd come from that traditional Jewish background as well, so he's steeped in the Old Testament as well.
Didn't believe a word of it, of course.
No, didn't believe a word. He was far too clever for it all. But awful death, cancer of the jaw, I believe. The jaw fell off. They had to fit him with a false jaw. Pus was sort of seeping out. Even the poor dog, which I see in the distance as a dog running to waters, was starting to seep out. So yeah, I'm glad we got there anyway.
Of course, the stench was so bad the dog couldn't go into the same room as him.
Terrible. But that's what happens when you're smoking, about 20 cigars a day as well. But Sigmund Freud, the man's gone, but the myth lingers on.
You made an interesting comment a few days ago about how the Catholic Church has stolen some of our biblical truths, like the Trinity, like the deity of Christ, the resurrection, and that's, I think, goes some way to explain why so many people professing King James Bible believers are attacking biblical truths like the Trinity and the resurrection and the deity of Christ.
Yeah.
Can you just further elaborate on that?
Yeah, I mean, this has been around for quite a while. I think I read about it a few years ago. I mean, the early apostolic church, which was founded by the apostles, which was always there, was there until Constantine came along. And then Constantine came along, and the Catholic Church sort of grew from the decline of Constantine. The Catholic Church ascended, the other one descended. But yes, it's got the Trinity. The Catholic Church believed in the Trinity, which is stolen from the apostolic.
But do they really
church.
believe in it, or did
No,
just give it lip
think
service?
It came in with idolatry and Mary and all this sort of thing. But as you say, they accept the miracles, they accept the resurrection, they accept...
Officially they do, officially.
Officially they do. But so much of their own theology has been put in there as well, the cult of Mary, and each pope seems to bring in more of the cult as well, especially John Paul II.
But isn't it absurd to throw out the Trinity because the Catholic Church believe it? or
Yeah.
the resurrection or the virgin birth,
Well,
because the Catholic Church believe it.
They stole that from they stole that from the early apostolic church, as indeed does the homosexual movement, who stole the rainbow,
Yeah, that's
and
right, the
also
rainbow.
stole the
And they claim King James as their own.
and came King James as their own as well. And also they stole the word gay. I mean,
Crazy.
gay means happy.
Yeah.
You're a happy person. I won't use the word gay at all, but they stole that, and they've stolen the rainbow, which is God's covenant with Abraham. They wouldn't destroy it again by water, by fire.
Yeah, I mean, we said it before. If we were the devil, if I was the devil, I would pick truth and falsehood. I'd mix it all up, because at the same time, you want to reach out to people, don't you? I mean, the devil is a very religious character. He is a spirit, of course, and spiritual beings are very religious. But I think you made a good point about how the Trinity shouldn't be thrown out because the Catholic Church have adopted it. I mean, they've hijacked it.
They've hijacked that.
They've
yeah.
hijacked.
That's right.
They've hijacked the New Testament. They've hijacked the virgin birth, the miracles.
The miracles, the
We
resurrection,
shouldn't throw all those
yeah,
biblical
that's
truths
right.
because the
But-
Church of Rome holds them,
But
or officially they hold them.
But all stolen anyway, yeah.
What else do you want to talk about?
Well, we're still sending a lot of tracts out. People ask us to send tracts out, and praise the Lord, most of them do get through. Unfortunately, a lot of them don't get through, and we never hear from some of them. We sent something to Australia a couple of months ago, never heard another word. We went into the post office, we checked it out, and we're told it's still in transit about 3 months later.
Yeah.
So then, and Canada, we've had trouble there as well. Some countries it gets through very, very quickly. We're still sending them out, and we thank all the people who've asked us for them, and we thank the people who are actually going out on the streets, giving out tracts. That's what it's all about. You've got to get out on the streets.
Just back to Brussels very quickly. I think what's interesting to us is how, first of all, it has to survive, as the Catholic Church has to survive, for the Lord to destroy both during the tribulation or at the end of the tribulation. We see the Pope very much being the false prophets from the book of Revelation, and the Antichrist probably coming from the political realm. Brussels is a very powerful organisation. I mean, Hitler could never have dreamed how powerful Brussels would be.
Well, he tried to set it up. He tried to set up something like it with all the countries that he had occupied, but he'd been really.
And the current guy who's running it is a German called Juncker.
Juncker, yeah, that's right, yeah.
Interesting, isn't it? A German once again calling the shots.
That's right. He's got the biggest wine cellar in Europe, so I'm
Yeah.
told.
So the European Union can't fail. It has to survive for the Lord to destroy it.
It has to survive,
along
yeah.
with the Catholic
It has
Church.
to grow, and it has grown very quickly.
It has grown, but very contradictory. You've got people like Blair, a Roman Catholic, in favour of Brussels, Ian Duncan Smith, Jacob Rees-Mogg, all Catholic, who are against it, out of step with their own church. And I would have thought that the nuncio would have called Rees-Mogg in and Ian Duncan Smith to give him a prep talk.
Maybe he has. Maybe he did call the boys in and gave them a very nice lunch, and they said, well, we're not really interested. We're going to go our own way on this.
Which shows that many Catholics don't do as they're told.
As you mentioned years ago in Italy, birth control still on the books there, but it's got the highest number of... population was falling, wasn't it, in Italy?
Catholics population.
It's falling in Italy, yet they've still
Yeah.
got...
Well, it goes back to Paul VI, trying to stop birth control coming in.
Yeah, 1968.
And he
that's right.
got egg on his face.
Yep, that's right. Humane Vitae, I think, was the encyclical, and he never wrote another one after that.
So King James has been a great blessing for me. Check the newsletter out, which goes out at the end of the month. Very interesting and very scarred king. Was he saved? Yeah, quite possibly he was saved.
I hope so.
He was very
I hope so.
informative. He knew his Bible inside out, believed it, but was scarred. Was he effeminate? I don't accept the suggestion that he was a sodomite. I think he was more likely to have been scarred, like I say, and as far as we know, he was only ever married once. Didn't have multiple wives, unlike his Catholic colleagues and counterparts on the continent. But read the article, watch the video, and I think finally we'll talk about Munich Nights.
Come to Munich Nights. One day you'll meet King James and you can ask him about all of this. And I always remember that old story. You'll be surprised who's there.
Yeah.
You'll be surprised who's not there. And you'll be thankful that you're there. And I think that's probably going to be very true. You might even see Cromwell there, maybe. Think he's saved?
I believe Cromwell was saved. I mean, he said, I'm trusting in the covenant, which we'd accept to be faith alone, through the shed blood of Christ alone. King James would also say the same thing. But again, these guys are very political. They're very worldly. I mean, they really did live like kings, like David, like Solomon, going back to the two natures in the believer. But I think, just before we get on to Munich Nights, what continues to puzzle me and concern me is this infiltration into the King James movement. A lot of people are attacking the King James and attacking cardinal doctrines like the Trinity, like the virgin birth, like the deity of the Lord Jesus Christ, and also concerning eternal security. We have to watch these people. We have to be aware that enemies are going to infiltrate. They're going to come from within, not without. Paul told you this. and so too did Moses. If they came from outside, you could see it, you could spot it, but when it comes, or when they come from within, you should be aware of it. But maybe we'll touch on this a bit more before we wrap up. Munich Nights.
Munich Nights. Well, Munich Nights began, James, when we were in Golders Green last November. And we did an outreach down there, and we took a break. We went to a cafe, I remember. A lot of little private cafes there, very nice as well. And there was some newspapers there, which I hadn't seen recently. Normally up here we see most of the national papers, and I think one of the papers that I saw was USA Today. It's an American paper, and somebody left it there. And it gave the news that Auschwitz concentration camp guard, lowly guard, had been discovered living in America, and he was being taken back to Germany to stand trial. And I thought, this is interesting. And he was asked about this. He went to Germany, became the pillar of the community, Catholic of course, and much sought after, much admired man. But he said, I always knew the authorities would come and get me. And I thought, yes, he always knew. So since 1945, the end of the war, he escapes, he goes to America, but he's always looking over his shoulder. He always knew they'd come and get me. And I thought, this would make a great short story, a great long short story. And when I was a young man, I was very much influenced and enjoyed the short stories of people like, you probably never heard these people now, O. Henry, John O'Hara, great American writer who wrote Butterfield 8, Pal Joey, and Somerset Maugham, who's probably the greatest of them all. Wonderful stories, always a sting in the tail, and I thought this would make a long short story. So I drafted the idea of a young man. I won't go into too much of it because you can read all of this, but a young man.
You've written 10 volumes so far.
10 chapters so far, so it's gone much longer than short story. Who would be born about 1898. Why not put him in the Nazi Party at the beginning, recruit in the Nazi Party and go right through the Second World War and so forth? And I was able to bring in people like Captain Ernst Röhm and the brown shirts, who had this ability or knack to see something in someone they didn't see in themselves. There are people like this who see something, and I think this Prime Minister now saw something in the previous Prime Minister.
Theresa May and David Cameron.
She saw something in him which the others didn't, and he was an outsider then, of course.
Yeah, he was.
So Ernst Röhm, I thought, well, I'll bring him in, this young man who I'm writing about, Walter Kuiper. He meets Ernst Röhm. Röhm thinks, this man could be important to the party. I'll see Heinrich Himmler about this, which brought me into bringing this idea, which I wanted to examine of people seeing something in someone else. And I was also able to bring in Hermann Goering's wife at the time, Countess Karen Goering, who was also psychic, that she could see things in people as well. She could look at someone and knew all about them. So that was able to bring that in, and it's really gone from there to see what's happening, the rise of the Nazi Party. And I also want to look at this party rather a bit like the UKIP party, probably a few thousand members, but it has grown since it first started. I mean, the Nazi Party up to the 20s, only I think about 17,000 members. I mean, who would have thought that it could, win the election in 1933, and a whole thing would plan out for the Second World War and so forth. So I wanted to look at this, and these were ordinary people. Goering, Himmler, Hess,
working
Hitler,
class people.
Working class, getting together, saying, if we get in, we'll do this and we'll do that. And there's Himmler saying, we'll try and find Atlantis, we'll try and find about the hollow earth theory, we'll go to Stonehenge.
Flat Earth.
Flat Earth and all of that. Whoever thought these people are going to get to power? It's like saying Nigel Farage will be Prime Minister and Meghan Markle will be the future Queen of England. Can you imagine it? So that's been my project for the last year. As I say, I've done 10 chapters. Probably going to do another 10. I haven't got the Second World War yet, but I learned a lot from it.
You're starting in the 30s, and the plan is to conclude, in 2000? I mean, the year 2000?
It starts with the birth of the young man, 1898, and it ends in 2017.
Wow.
What do you make of that?
So just about mid to late 90s.
Keep going.
Yeah.
He's 127.
Yeah.
That's right. And you're going to say, how come he's got to be 127?
Yeah.
That's where the Jesuits come into it. But I haven't written this yet. But I was able, actually, I was very fortunate down there, and I think the Lord was with me. I was able to sketch it out.
Did you say 1897?
1898.
1898.
1898 he was born.
He dies 2017.
That's right.
Okay.
But I was able to sketch it out.
It's still quite early in the morning.
I was able to sketch it out back at our hotel, and I sketched it out right from the beginning and went all the way. And I've still got my original notes from last year, and I'm going back to find all of this as well. How's he lived that long? Has he found the secret of life, nirvana or whatever they call it? Maybe you'll have to see. But I hope you enjoy it. James has found some wonderful photographs which you put in there, and you've edited it very well, got everything lined up as well.
So another 12 months to run,
I think so, yeah. I mean, the character I'm writing about, Karen Ur and Walter Kuiper, they're my two characters. They've just got married. We've got to go to the
What's the year?
1929 at the moment. They just got married, so I've got Night of the Long Knives to go through, the Murder of Rome, which will greatly affect...
This will be a 2-year project.
I think it will be. I've got to do the Second World War, the capture of him at the end of the war, being imprisoned by the Russians, and also the growth of Germany after the war. I mean, Germany really took off after the war.
Amazing.
And so I've got all that to do as well. And this young man, not young man, at the end of the war in the 60s, he was there. He became a multi-millionaire, and he also found something which every American home, every English home, every African home should have. It's to do with television. Do you know what I'm talking about?
I do.
That's right. The remote control. Where do we be without it? He discovered that.
See, these all take time to prepare, time to research.
Yeah.
I spent 2 years on Cromwell. I spent 6 or 7 months on King James. I'm still reading stuff about him. In fact, before or in the lead up to the publication of the King James Bible, it wasn't called the King James Bible, it was called the Holy Bible.
Yeah.
It's only later on that it became known as the King James Bible.
And the AV.
And the AV being authorised version.
Yeah.
Of course, Parliament gave the green light to it, but really God gave the authorisation for the commissioning of the King James Bible. And unfortunately, people are attacking it because they are jealous of it. Let's be quite honest. People are jealous of the King James Bible. It's still the most sold book in the world. It continues, rightly so. It continues to change people's lives. It's the only book which really matters. All the others are counterfeits, some very devious counterfeits. And of course, you would expect, wouldn't you, infiltrators, imposters, phonies to come into our community and pretend to be one of us, and then turn around and attack the Trinity, or the deity of Christ, or eternal security.
Just finally wrap this up. There's no excuse for people to say, well, of course I can't get a King James Bible. You've got smartphones, you can go on there. I think there's a thing called Bible Gate, which has got the apps there. You can sit down in your own home and you can read it. Yeah. There's never been a better time to study your Bible, to study the King James Bible. You don't have to go in some shop and look for a second-hand King James Bible. It's all there. Technology's brought all this in.
And of course the Lord would have to wait for James to be born, because James is Jacob. And of course Jacob is Israel, and where the word of a king is, there's power. I mean, it all fits together like a glove.
I think so.
But because the devil is able to seduce people, he's able to get people to take their eyes off the book, and he says, look at King James, look at his lifestyle, but you know nothing about the commissioners, the editors of the NIV, do you? You couldn't name 2 or 3 of them, could you? Or the NASV, or the New King James, or the ESV, or the Message Bible. You know all about the King James Bible, don't you?
Yeah.
Which goes back to when we met Cardinal Winning in 2000.
Yeah.
He told us that he loves the King. He loved, he's dead now, how he loved, now get this, how he loved the King James Bible. And you go back a couple of 100 years, they were killing people.
He loved the poetry.
The poetry.
The poetry. It is beautiful poetry, the Psalms. And,
doesn't believe it, of course.
Doesn't believe it. The beautiful poetry. He said, I put it on a par with Shakespeare. Wow.
And this goes to the double talk.
That's the double talk.
Like the Catholics.
I'm not against the King James Bible, but there we are, yeah. And
So,
then they brought the Dewey version out, but we could go and talk about this all morning.
Okay then, so just an end of year video. Thank you for your prayers and support throughout the year of 2018. Please check out the new website.
Absolutely.
It's all beautifully designed and indexed. You can find all of our articles and our sermons. Also, just a quick mention, if I may, this Sunday, Lord willing, I will be starting Exodus chapter 20, the 10 Commandments. Looking forward to doing that. And the first week in January, Lord willing, I will start to upload Exodus chapter 1, and my goal will be to upload a chapter each and every month, and maybe another 2 years, I guess, from beginning to end, to finish the entire book of Exodus and to upload what I've already recorded. Again, these projects take time. We've travelled 5,000 miles this year. We're not just writing articles or doing videos. We're trying to get the gospel out. We're trying to get people saved. We try and kill 2 or 3 birds with one stone. During our time in Scotland, we weren't just filming for King James, we're doing street work.
You're doing a Bible study every morning.
A Bible study, trying to,
Preparing notes,
bless the
getting
group.
everything ready.
But our main purpose at Ex-Catholics of Christ is to get people saved, born again, washed in the blood. So please pray for us. Please continue to stand with us as we go through 2019. And I think probably that's enough for now.
We've got a lot to do there. Just a quickie about writing. Somebody once said it's 99% perspiration, 1% writing. The preparation, the reading, the assimilating the word.
Rewrites.
That's what the rewrites, that's not happy.
Double checking your facts.
Takes all the time. Someone says that's wrong there. That's what takes all the time.
Yeah.
And then you pray the Lord will lead you. And even with Munich Nights, although it's a secular story.
And it's fictitious.
It's fictitious as well, but I have put real life people in there, of course, with the third right. But I've also brought Bible in there as much as I could, the Proverbs and the Psalms and so forth, as I believe it should be in there. So So, of course, I pray for guidance on all of it, and as I know you do as
Absolutely.
well. But thank you to all of you people who write to us and let us know that you're praying for us. Much appreciated. We need your prayers very much. Certainly what we're trying to do. We live in very strange, very dangerous times at the moment. We look forward to the Lord to come back. We are ready. And
also the rapture's under attack as well.
The rapture's under attack as well, yes, that's right.
Jesuit invention.
So-called experts are looking at another Jesuit invention. Oh,
Trinity,
boy.
Jesuit invention.
Yeah.
Some people got the Jesuits on their minds.
And Omega Point.
He wrote six articles on the Jesuits. He spent 2.5 years researching the Jesuits. He knows more about the Jesuits than most people do. And even he doesn't give them more credit than they probably deserve. The devil isn't God. Is that what the Freemasons say? The Freemasons say that Jehovah is the devil.
That's right.
And the devil is Jehovah.
Yeah.
Don't give the devil too much credit. Don't give the Jesuits too much credit. As much as wicked as they are, they're not God, are they?
No, they're not God. No, but the Jesuits, a very, very devious crowd. They seem to be surviving through all of it, with this Pope and everything, who's pushing...
But they're only men.
Raw Marxism. Only men. And every so often something comes along, like a certain cardinal who got arrested and he's been sentenced there. So it does get through there. But the Lord will, the Bible will survive. The King James Bible will survive. What's it done? 200 years?
Since it came out?
Yes.
Over 400 years.
400 years. Well, there we are. And it's as read today. It's still a bestseller today. And I say you've got your smartphones now and everything. So technology could lead you to learn more about the King James Bible.
Okay, well, thank you as always for watching our videos. Join us this Sunday for Exodus chapter 20. And again, look out for Exodus chapter 1, which, Lord willing, will be uploaded during the first week in January.
Blessings and thank you. Maranatha.